Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sandra and I talk all things writing and books. Every year, my criteria for my favorite books of the year changes. In 2024, after coming out of a long writing drought, I realized that the books that left a long-lasting impression on me were the ones that made me say, wow, I want to write like that, or wow, I want to live that way. I've found that feeling in two classics, one biographical essay collection, one dual biography, two memoirs, two retellings, and two novels. So here are the 10 books that made me struggle between wanting to keep reading and wanting to get up and write. The first book is obviously Dracula by Bram Stoker. As most of you know, I've been working on a vampire book, so it's led me to read all the vampire classics. I can assure you that Dracula is well worth the read, and it made me want to explore the nature of nightmares in my own book, so much so that I picked up another book that's called Night Terrors, but I'll talk about that in a separate video. I'm not joking when I say I would describe this book as saccharine. This book feels deeply emotional and at times perturbing. As I mentioned many times in my Dracula reading vlog, this book was just so sentimental. All in all, this is not only one of the quintessential books for vampire lovers, but also for people that suffer from sleep disorders will relate to this one. Also, in my book, you're not allowed to tell me that you love the Nosferatu movies without having read Dracula. I'm obviously kidding, but you will be doing yourself a disservice not reading Dracula. No man knows till he has suffered from the night how sweet and how dear to his heart and I the morning can be. The second book on my list is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. It took me so long to pick this up and I'm so glad that I finally read this all the way through. Jane Eyre is a beautiful, deeply intuitive coming-of-age novel about an orphan girl named Jane. We follow her from her childhood into her early adulthood as she's known very little moments of peace and love and happiness. If you enjoy books that delve deep into introspective and the human psyche, you will love this book. This book also deals with concepts of revenge, love, loss, and generosity. And if you enjoy reading books with those concepts at the forefront, you will definitely love Jane Eyre. Presentiments are strange things, and so are sympathies, and so are signs, and the three combined make one mystery to which humanity has not yet found the key. I never laughed at presentiments in my life, because I've had strange ones of my own. Sympathies, I believe, exist, for instance, between far-distant, long-absent, wholly estranged relatives asserting, notwithstanding their alienation, the unity of the source to which each traces his origin, whose workings baffle mortal comprehension, and signs, for aught we know, may be but the sympathies of nature with man. So some of these books were so impactful to me that I would take myself out of my social media ban just to post a little TikTok explaining something I love about the book or explaining a thought that I had or a feeling that I had, and then I would just like delete the app off my phone. So I'm going to share those throughout this video. So for this one, I posted, I read Jane Eyre 2 weeks ago and I'm still as lonely and empty as ever. And plus, how am I supposed to continue writing when such masterpiece exists? Okay, very dramatic, but just know that that's when you know a book impacted me. The third book on my list is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. I also mentioned this in my nonfiction book recommendations that I filmed this year. I want to briefly mention that John Green was my favorite author when I was a teenager, and he still remains one of my favorite authors in adulthood, and I am excited to read more of his nonfiction, which we'll be getting this year in 2025. But having said that, what makes John Green's books so good? I think it's because John Green writes with a humanitarian and hopeful heart, and you see that throughout anything he writes and anything he produces. All in all, The Anthropocene Reviewed reminded me of the importance of sharing what I love and what intrigues me in life, and not only doing so in writing, but also in real life and also on my YouTube channels. And it's just such a good reminder to create community even around certain things that we don't normally talk about, you know, or discuss for a few minutes on a random topic that interests us, because that's what really makes us humans, to share the little details and the little anecdotes and stories and interests that we have. John Green also showed me that essays like the ones in this collection can be at once personal, informational, and transformative all at once, which is fantastic. So for those of you who read this book, you'll understand me when I say I rate this book 5 out of 5 stars. Here's a passage from page 7 of the introduction. At the end of his life, the great picture book author and illustrator Maurice Sendak said on the NPR show Fresh Air, I cry a lot because I miss people. I cry a lot because they die and I can't stop them. They leave me and I love them more. He said, I'm finding out as I'm aging that I'm in love with the world. It has taken me all my life up to now to fall in love with the world, but I've started to feel it in the last couple of years. To fall in love with the world isn't to ignore or overlook suffering, both human and otherwise. For me anyway, to fall in love with the world is to look up at the night sky and feel your mind swim before the beauty and the distance of the stars. It is to hold your children while they cry, to watch as the sycamore trees leaf out in June. When my breastbone starts to hurt and my throat tightens and tears well in my eyes, I want to look away from feeling. I want to deflect with irony or anything else that will keep me from feeling directly. We all know how loving ends, but I want to fall in love with the world anyway, to let it crack me open. I want to feel what there is to feel while I'm here. Sendak ended that interview with the last words he ever said in public. Live your life, live your life, live your life. Here is my attempt to do so. My fourth book on this list is Walk Through Walls, a memoir by Marina Abramović. Raised by communist Yugoslavian parents, an emotionally distant father, and an overbearing mother, Marina has made art out of her Balkan upbringing. Walk Through Walls is an excellent memoir for all daring artists to read. Marina Abramović has never let her fear hold her back from pushing the boundaries and disturbing the status quo from her performances. Mocked, ridiculed, loved, praised, hated, and uplifted, she continues to range in these extreme spectrums. Critics from the past and future present continue to talk about her. In a way, she reminds me of the late American filmmaker David Lynch. Rest in peace, David Lynch. His passing has really affected the art world. I'm currently reading his memoir, but we'll talk about that on a separate video. I put this book off for many years until I was ready for a severe transformation. I had known about Marina Abramović. I've watched a lot of her exhibitions that were recorded, and I've seen a lot of her stuff online, obviously, and I really do want to see at some point her stuff in real life before, you know, she passes. I mean, she's really old, but she looks like she's really healthy old, but you never can tell. So I'm hoping that one day soon I will be able to see something before I missed that opportunity. All in all, this memoir made me want to take risks. It made me want to post and write whatever I want to post and write and not care about being a dancing monkey online anymore. If I want to do something, fine. If I don't want to do something, I won't do it. I don't care to be seen as vulnerable or a deeply emotive person. I honestly don't even care if I come off as troubled and even desperate sometimes, because at the end of the day, I'm a human person and I have scars. I have some scars that are not even invisible. You know, I cannot just shun myself and just pretend to be another person just for the sake of, you know, putting on a performance. I think there's a strange line between performing and being yourself authentically, and you have to be the one to know when you can cross those lines and when you can effortlessly weave those lines in your real life, in your art, in, you know, your audience as well. Beforehand, I was so nervous that I was scared I'd get one of my incapacitating whole body migraines. I would hardly breathe from the idea that I was going to do this, but I was also serious about what I was about to do, 100% committed. I was so serious about everything then, yet I think I needed this gravity. Much later on, I read a statement of Bruce Newman's, "Art is a matter of life and death." It sounds melodramatic, but it's also true. This was exactly how it was for me, even at the beginning. Art was life and death. There was nothing else. It was so serious and so necessary. The fifth book on my list is Just Kids by Patti Smith. I sincerely don't know how to talk about Just Kids. I think most people have either read this or heard about this at some point. Most people know of Patti Smith or have heard of her or heard one of her songs at some point as well. It's basically the book for artists and creatives out there. Patti Smith is the embodiment of the artist spirit and its uncrushable soul. In this memoir, Patti Smith details her life as a starving artist starting out in New York City. She recounts her loving and supportive relationship with this artist turned photographer called Robert Mapplethorpe in the late 60s and 70s. Together as amateurs, they are plunged into the world of sex, drugs, and alcohol of New York City, and then they emerge as fully formed artists. "Oh, take their picture," said the woman to her bemused husband. "I think they're artists." "Oh, go on," he shrugged. "They're just kids." The sixth book on my list, and I know you guys saw this coming from a mile away, is Romantic Outlaws by Charlotte Gordon. Romantic Outlaws is the biography that outlines the extraordinary lives of Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley. I believe that one day I will have the guts and the strength to make a whole video or a whole series on Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley. I think I'm just not ready yet, and I think I will just keep on exploring that in writing for now. Drama, tragedy, love, loss, grief, the rights of women, it's all in this book. It's all in this beautifully crafted 500-page biography. Although mother and daughter never meet, Mary Wollstonecraft died mere days after delivering Mary Godwin, which we know her as Mary Shelley. The parallels between both women's lives are so uncanny, tragic, and insane. I still can't wrap my head around everything that these two Marys contributed to the literary canon in different ways, but in such impactful ways. Like I just sometimes I just cannot even fathom how these two Marys, connected by blood, did all of that. Honestly, this dual timeline biography is so respectful, is so beautifully written, it's so careful and meticulous. I just highly recommend it. Before I share a passage from this book, I'm going to share a passage from a TikTok that I posted. Yes, once again, oh my god, self-indulgent. Let's read it. "I love being a reader because sometimes I'm so unwell that reading about two women who felt the same way as I do 2 centuries ago and still persisted in writing groundbreaking work makes me feel inspired and less alone in my suffocating misery." Can you tell I was going through it? Because I was going through it, so much so that I sound like a cliche. Anyways, let's read a passage from this book. By connecting Frankenstein to her own genesis, Mary hints at the many ties she felt to her story. Like the creature, she felt abandoned by her creator. Like Frankenstein, she felt compelled to create. Her own birth had caused the death of her mother, but it had also brought life to her characters. This is just one of very many passages and quotes that resonated. And then similarly, the 7th book on my list is Mary and the Birth of Frankenstein by Anne Eckhout. This was written by Anne Eckhout, but it was translated from the Dutch by Laura Watkinson. It's a beautiful reimagining / retelling of 2 timelines of Mary Shelley's life that enabled her to write Frankenstein. In the first timeline, we follow Mary during her 1816 stay at the Villa Diodati in Lake Geneva. This is the year without summer where ash and soot was coming down the sky in Europe because of a volcanic eruption in Indonesia. Mary is 18 at this point. She has a child with Percy Bysshe Shelley, and they're there with her stepsister Claire, who is infatuated, in love, obsessed with the extraordinary playboy poet Lord Byron. Mary is dealing with grief from the loss of her child, and one night Lord Byron, who's bored out of his mind because there's nothing to do, it's always raining, it's always ashing out there, and he decides that they're all gonna write a ghost story. And at the time, that included Lord Byron himself, Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, and as well John Polidori, who is actually Lord Byron's physician and biographer. In the second timeline, we follow Mary in 1812 while she's a guest at the Baxter family house in Dundee, Scotland. She becomes close to Isabella Baxter, who just lost her mother, and she's also the youngest girl of the family. Both girls become inseparable, and their desire and imagination run wild. They uncover Scottish mythical figures and creatures and monsters and ghosts in the Scottish lowlands when they're out in the forest and in the fields exploring. To quote myself from my book review that I posted on my blog, I wrote, "This is a great work of imagination. And not only that, this is a wonderful book about imagination and the necessity of imagination in the creative journey." Now let's read a passage. "I was proud of myself for inventing something that gave people pleasure. I had taken something from real life and twisted it and spun it out until there was more to it than what really had happened, until it was more than the truth." The 8th book on my list is Wicked by Gregory Maguire. This is a reimagining of the Wicked Witch of the West's life before the events that happened in The Wizard of Oz, before basically Dorothy came from Kansas to Oz. Wicked is pretty dense. It's a story of love, cruelty, injustice, abuse, violence, class and racial division, amongst other similar themes. This is not for the faint-hearted. We follow Elphaba, the green wicked witch who's been mistreated her whole life because of her skin color. We briefly watch the events of her childhood and her teenage years shape Elphie to be the witch that we know her as. But behind all that is wicked, we see a girl that is fighting against the discriminations and the crime against talking animals in the land of Oz. Like I said, the story was so rich. Everything from the language to the politics to the characters was so meticulously crafted with care and attention. This book reminded me why I love storytelling, and it also reminded me that some stories have it all. They have story, plot, characters, world building all in one, and you can just enjoy the writing style and enjoy all the other elements too. I believe more than anything, this story has left me changed for the better and for the worse. I'm saying this as someone who read and digested this before going to watch the movie, which is a bit different from the book. I will definitely be reading the entire series at some point later in the year, and I will be filming my live reactions. But for now, let's share a passage. It's people who claim that they're good or any way better than the rest of us that you have to be wary of. The before last book on my list is When We Lost Our Heads by Heather O'Neill. When I read When We Lost Our Heads and witnessed the rich female portrayals of women's lives and desires, it just made me want to get up and write. We primarily follow two main characters. We have Marie Antoine, which is loosely inspired by Marie Antoinette, and Sadie Arnett. As you can tell, there's a lot of moving around of letters and sounding words to make it sound like Marie Antoinette separated in two people. When Sadie's middle-class parents move to the Golden Mile, 12-year-old Mary and Sadie become instant frenemies. The desire and passion for one another leads them to a deadly act, and they're immediately separated. As I said, they live in the Golden Mile of Montreal in the 1870s. On the other side of the strip lays industrial destitution. Brothels are in full swing, while factory girls are starving, dying, and losing their little fingers. After Marie Antoine's father passes, she becomes the head of the sugar empire. Meanwhile, Sadie returns from overseas, and she returns as an outcast and an aspiring novelist. Let them eat cake, off with their heads. This book at the forefront explores questions of female empowerment, sexuality, desire, and authorship. Once again, I'll share a TikTok that I posted while I was reading this. Do you want to know how I know a book is fantastic? When it makes me want to stop reading it instantly, get up and go write. When a book slightly leaves a door ajar and the flood claims me again. When the dam I created is decisively destroyed. Now let's read a passage from the actual book. There were such new possibilities in writing from a perspective of female desire. That excited Sadie as an artist. Sadie wanted to put things in literature that had never been there before. In fact, putting experiences into books that hadn't been there before was the modus operandi of a writer. It was like being a butterfly collector. You didn't want the same common butterflies every collector had. You wanted the rare butterfly with black spots on its wings that only emerges at the witching hour and sheepishly tucks its antennae into the closing mouth of drowsy flowers. The last book on my list is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. I read this at the beginning of 2024. I read this at the perfect time. I was coming out of 3 years of dissociative disenchantment, and this book just really resonated with me. At the time, I was obsessed with self-help books, and I was determined to crush anything that made me feel real or creative. And can we just appreciate for a second that magic cannot be squashed? Because it really can't be. A Study in Drowning was the perfect book to make me believe in magic and in stories again. The story follows Effie Sayer. She's tasked, along with her rival, Preston Hillary, to redesign Hewitt Manor, which is the family home of deceased author Emrys Murden. Effie, who's always believed in the stories of the Fairy King, venerates this author for his fable called Angarard, in which he writes about a mortal girl who falls in love with the Fairy King and then destroys him. But in this tale, all is not as it seems to be, and the stakes are running high because the manor is actually crumbling into the sea, so she has to put her head together with her enemy to figure all of this out. The way the main character Effie feels about the fictional manuscript Angarard is the same way that Alexander the Great felt about the Iliad, and is the same way that I feel about Frankenstein and Mary Shelley in general. Although this is another story about stories, it's also a story about seeking the truth while still believing in magic. Questions of female power, voices, and survival also come up in this book. Actually, if I dig deeper and think about it, I can see the invisible thread between Romantic Outlaws, Mary and the Burton Frankenstein, When We Lost Our Heads, and A Study in Drowning, and probably other little things here and there from other books that I read. As I was thinking about my vampire book, I unconsciously picked up all these books that sound very similar to my book and that had very similar themes that really interested me when it came to authorship and agency and creatures and mythical creatures and creating something and losing something and turning on the creator, or the creator turns on you. So all these little things together added up to some of my favorite books this year, and some of the books that motivated me and inspired me to keep on writing without me knowing until I basically crafted this list. Also, another notable mention is Lady Macbeth, that was also published and released in 2024, and it was also by the author Ava Reid. It's also a book that follows the same themes and retelling style structure. It is a very loose retelling of Macbeth with the main focus as Lady Macbeth, and I really enjoyed and loved that one. Honestly, it's a close second, but I definitely enjoyed the first book that I read by Ava Reid first. So we're going to do a little special edition. I'm going to share 2 quotes this time. So the first one is, Effie hated that she couldn't tell right from wrong, safe from unsafe. Her fear had transfigured the entire world. Looking at anything was like trying to glimpse a reflection in a broken mirror, all of it wrapped and shattered and strange. The truth was very costly at times. How terrible to navigate the world without a story to comfort you. So that was the end. Those were the 10 top books I read in 2024. Those were the books that mainly inspired me to keep on writing, that really made me fall in love with stories and the way of being a creative person in life, and to just embrace that side of me and to just be unapologetic and to write whatever I want to write, to post whatever I want to post, and to just be authentically myself, both in how I present myself and how I present myself on the page as well. So I really do hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know if you've read any of these books, if you heard of them, or if I've convinced you to pick one of these books up. I would love to know. If you have any recommendations of any books that are similar to these books, I would love to hear them. Let me know what you want to see next in regards to writing and reading or storytelling or book recommendations. I would love to know. For now, I hope that you are reading good stories. I hope that you're creating good stories, and I hope that your life is a good story. And I'll see you on the next writing or bookish video. Bye!